welcome. Today we're looking at how to draft a two-piece sleeve block. Now we can draft this block, this type of sleeve, using our dress bodice block, our top bodice block, or our coat block. So today we're looking at it in relation to our coat block, but the principles I'm showing you today can also be used for your top block. So it's a really nice transferable little way of drafting a sleeve. I'm Izzy at Minerva, and today I'm going to be talking through step by step how to draft this sleeve. Once we've drafted the sleeve up together, then next week we're going to create our pattern pieces of our coat block and our two-piece sleeve block, and then sew it up together to check it for fit. You're going to need your standard pattern drafting tools, which are listed next to me right here. You'll notice there that I've put our coat block simply because that's the one that I'm going to be referring to today, because we did our coat block last week for our bodice, for our coat front and our coat back. So we're going to be looking at how to do that today. As always with these videos, I'm going to be using fat marker pens. Please at home do use a nice sharp pencil, simply because that's going to give you a lot more accuracy. I'm using the fat marker pens just so you can see on the screen above. And in today's video, I am wearing a little self-drafted playsuit that we drafted a couple of weeks ago using our jersey stretch block. And this is in our Minerva exclusive viscose fabric, and it's Orchard Spray is the pattern. So it's a nice viscose jersey stretch fabric. If you want to replicate what I'm wearing today, you can refer back to our video from a few weeks ago to see what that looks like. And of course, we'll tag that in the video description below for you. Okay, so the very first thing you're going to need to do to follow along today is take a few body measurements. So let's just refer back to how we do that, and I'll show you a clip on how to measure your arm and how to get the measurements that you need for this block. Let's do that now. Okay, so to measure the arm length, what we need to do is find the shoulder point on the end of the shoulder and take our tape measure from that point to the elbow and down to the wrist. So grab your tape measure, pop it where the shoulder point is on the shoulder, and then run your tape measure just to follow the contour, the line of your arm, all the way down to the bottom, just like that. Okay, so in front of you here on the screen, I've got my coat block. This is the front and this is the back. Now the reason I've got this on the screen is because we're going to do a lot of cross-referencing between this arm side here and the block that we're going to be drawing here for our sleeves. So it's just really helpful to have it there so we can just easily refer to it whenever we need to. Okay, and then you also need your sleeve body measurements. So you should have already measured your arm side depth and your arm length. You should have those too. Our arm side length, though, actually needs to be measured together, and that is the length of this curve around here. I've already written mine down, but for you at home, let's just measure that out together. So grab a nice tape measure, and all we're going to do is just walk it along the line, walk it along the curve of the arm side. Now obviously the tape measure has a little bit of a curve to it, and it can form the shape of the arm side really nicely, so it's much easier to measure your curves of your arm side this way rather than with a ruler. So take that measurement, and I would recommend doing it at least 3 times just to double check you're getting it nice and accurate. It's really easy to kind of go slightly off when it's so curvy, so take it at least 3 times to make sure you're getting it correct. Okay, and then the cuff size is just a generic measurement. I'm going to pop up on the screen a sort of range of sizes. This is just an approximate guide based on your bust circumference, so your sort of body size, what your two-piece cuff size should be. Okay, so the arm side length, which is this one, I've written mine down already. Okay, to start off with, we're going to do a series of construction or grid lines, and these are going to just help us to draw our sleeves really nicely and accurately. I'm going to choose to do these in a dashed line just so you can really clearly see what is a construction line and what is a block line for your actual sleeve. So the very first thing we want to do is to draw a line that is the length of our arm, or the sleeve length that we want. For me, it's going to be 57 centimetres. Great, then just square across about 30 centimetres, maybe a little bit more if you want to. Next, take your arm side length, which is 51 centimetres for me, and just divide that by 3. Mark that distance down from the top corner up here and then just square across. Measure that distance, tap it into your calculator and divide it by 3. Then add 1 centimetre. Mark that distance from the top here, and then just square across. Measure that distance again, you might well have that in your memory now, and then divide it by 4. And then very simply, whatever that distance is, just mark it offset from that bottom line that you've drawn. And that will become a little help point later on. Now, whatever distance that is that you've still got in your calculator, so for me, 4.2, we're then just going to measure that distance up along this line here from the bust line. So for me, 4.2. And then just square across to the arm side line. You can label this point here FP, which stands for the front pitch point. And actually, really, that's where your little notch will be when you start to draft out your pattern piece. Okay, next, measure the distance between these 2 lines. And whatever that distance is, just mark it up along the back arm side line here. I'm going to mark that on, and this can be labelled as your back pitch point, so BP. I'm going to label a few other bits here because I think that's going to help us. I'm going to label down here side seam, just put a double S there for the side seam. And then up here, I'm going to label that front shoulder point, and this is the back shoulder point. Okay, at this point we've got a couple of measurements that we need to make a note of in terms of our arm side length, so let's do that together. The first one we want to measure is the front shoulder point to the front pitch point here. So I've just added that there, and we're just going to measure that length. Do get this as accurate as possible and take a few measurements if you need to. And then take the back shoulder point, which is here, to the back pitch point and measure that. And then our final measurement is going to be a straight one. So we're going to measure in a straight line from our back pitch point to our side seam, and then just make a little note of that. Okay, next tap in this calculation here, so your front shoulder point down to your front pitch point, tap that into your calculator and then add 1 centimetre for ease. That's all we're going to be adding that for. Whatever that distance is going to become a construction line. So grab your ruler and at this cross point here that we drew, find the point, so leave your pivot your ruler at that point and then pivot it along until it hits the top line at the distance that you need. For me, it was 19 centimetres. Then just draw a little help line, a nice little construction line all the way up in a nice straight line. Next, take this measurement that you did here to work out the back of the arm side, so that's this one here, and then add 0.8 centimetres for ease. Whatever that distance is, we're going to use our pivot point up here and then just pivot the ruler until it hits this line, so the middle line up here, at the length that is on our calculator. So for me, I want that line to be 13 centimetres, and then just draw a little construction line in a straight line that is that length down. Find the midpoint of that line and then just square up by 1 centimetre. That's going to become a help point when we draw in the curve of the head in a little bit. Then measure this length here of that line that you just drew, divide it by 3 and mark a point that is 1/3 of the way along, and then square up by 2 centimetres this time. Next, measure the distance from the side seam out to this line here, and then working along this line here, the lowest line that we've drawn so far, mark a point that is that distance along the line. Working at this point here, this one here, we're just going to mark a point that is 2 centimetres above, and then we're just going to square across by 2 centimetres, and then we're going to square out by 2 centimetres. Then just square all the way down. Great, so just like that. And then using the centre line here, we're just going to extend it now by 3 centimetres, and then we're going to square across. Draw a diagonal line from this point here down to the bottom line. That is the length of your cuff. And this is our very first block line. And then just join these little points here to create an extended sleeve like that. Next, find the midpoint between this point and down there, and then square across. Mark a help point from here inwards of the elbow line that is 2 centimeters. This line here basically represents the inner seam line, but we want to curve it out. So from here to here, we then want to curve it inwards into the sleeve block by 2 centimeters, which is this little help point here. So really what we want to do is just create a nice curve like this and just draw that in. And the same for this one here. From these 2 points, we're going to curve in to that point there, which is 2 centimeters inward of that line. Okay, what we're going to do next is actually draw in our sleeve head for the bigger part of the sleeve. So using your pattern drafting ruler, start at this point here to find a nice soft curve. Mark this point and join this point up to that help point that you drew. Continue up to the top of the sleeve head and then continue down to the next help point that you drew, trying to create a nice soft curve. Continue then all the way down to that help point there and just continue on to the underarm seam there. Okay, the next measurement we want to work with is our side seam to our back pitch point, which is here. That was a straight line that we drew. Whatever measurement you've got there, we're then now going to work with that measurement, starting at this cross here. So take your side seam to back pitch point and then add 0.5 centimeters. And then draw a line that is that length up to the top line here. Find the midpoint of that line and then square out by 1.5 centimeters. Use a pattern drafting ruler or just draw it by hand to draw in the underarm side to just curve really nicely and gently from that point, using your help points up to the top there. Okay, working from that top point there, we now want to draw a line that is a construction line from this point all the way down to the bottom. And also from the back of that curve there, all the way down to the same point. Then working on the elbow line here, offset a point from each line that is 2.3 centimeters offset. And then very simply, all we want to do is to find a nice curve that's going to join this up to that point and then on and down that way. And then just draw it out. And do the same for this inner curve here. Okay, and then we'll just label them. So this one on the inside is called the undersleeve. And this one, the bigger one, is the one that's on the top. So this is very simply just called the top sleeve. And then just finally, we are going to join these 2 lines together to create the bottom of our cuff for our undersleeve. Brilliant. So we are done with our 2-piece sleeve block. Congratulations, that's amazing. So the theory and the principle is now drawn out. Next week, we're going to be looking at how to create our pattern pieces and then how to sew them up nice and accurately to check the fit. So that's always the fun bit. We are not expecting it to fit you perfectly. We never do with these blocks. There's always fit that is required. So I'm looking forward to working through that with you next time. So thank you for joining me today. I've been Izzy at Minerva, and I'll see you next week as we continue this series.